Majesty's Royal Navy in order to be running guns to Joseph Stalin, which was what he was in fact doing, escorting those convoys over the hump of Scandinavia to the Russian ports of Murmansk and Archangel. And in fact, his entire life was lived slightly as someone who was taken advantage of by the establishment to which he was so devoted. So I felt sorry for him when I was growing up, which is probably not a terrifically good thing to feel for your old man, because he'd been so loyal to the Crown, the Empire, the Tory party, the Navy, and he'd got nothing out of it. And as people used to say, he was Tory but nothing to be Tory about. And he was left on the beach. After the war, they downsized the Navy and let him go. And he was never the same again. I hope I'm not going on too much about this, but you did ask. And it's very informative on me because it strikes me all the time that the ruling class has this permanent reservoir of people who are very loyal to it and get nothing in return, and who are, in a sense, being exploited. And that had a very important influence on moving me to the left when I was young.
Do you remember?
Oh, and yes, he did have a fondness. He did have a fondness for old-style jazz, and he liked one of his favourite songs was "My Very Good Friend the Milkman," which I still can't hear without emotion. And then "Your Feet's Too Big," of all things. And then when he took me, he came to London because he was going to the last reunion. I could tell it was going to be the last of his old shipmates. They were gathering in some broken-down old Navy club. And we went along, and he asked me if I'd come. I was amazed. I never thought he'd ask me to a thing like that. I thought I'd been a disappointment to him. But there they all were, these old sea dogs, gathered for the last time. And they all called him Hitch, which I'd never heard anyone be called before, which was what my friends were starting to call me. So there was, at the last, a slight male bond between me and the commander. The commander and me, I should say. Sorry.
And for some reason, this name has stuck with you. You make a lot in the book about how important your name was going to be for you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you're growing up in a lower middle-class family that's desperately trying to escape the class below it, and your family name is Hitchens, and your name is Christopher, first name, if people start calling you Chris, to be matey, say, it's Chris Hitchens at first, but it's Chris Hitchens quite soon. A whole aspirate has dropped out of the equation. And then you're in danger of being common, vulgar. My mother wouldn't have any of that. And I more or less promised her I wouldn't allow it. But people kept doing it. They still do because they think it's friendly. Hi, Chris. No, thank you. Would you mind? I'm against circumcision of all kinds and amputation of children. And so I'll stick to this nice name. Oh, good. Actually, I thought I would get more applause, but there. It should, if anyone wants to saw off bits of their genitalia, they should do it when they're grown up and have made the decision for themselves.
How did you get there?
Well, it had to come because that's part of the family secret too. I didn't know my mother was Jewish. I thought I was circumcised for the same reason as all other middle-class boys, and I still sometimes brood on the missing bits. But that's getting ahead too. So I write, it's also part of the second identity or split personality or divided self that I write about throughout the book, which is the theme of it. I nearly called it Both Sides. Now I'm glad I didn't. But it would have been a good enough working title. When I was at university, I was Chris during the working day. In other words, I was wearing a donkey jacket and giving out leaflets outside the car factories and waving the flag of the Viet Cong and other things that I would do again proudly. But in the evening, thinking life isn't all politics, I would be Christopher and I'd put on a dinner jacket and try and have a sort of bride's head regurgitated, good time, which I thought I was entitled to after something like 12 years of being stuck in a monastic boys-only school.
Which was not all pleasure.
So Hitch is a perfect solution to the Christopher problem. It's ideal. Though it is a circumcision of Hitchens, I will admit. Actually, that thought hadn't occurred to me till this minute. Damn. Well, there you go.
There is a second edition.
Yeah,
maybe,
nothing comes for free. Yeah.
You spoke earlier about the impact your father had on you. A man of few words, something one probably wouldn't likely say about you. I think we can move quite elegantly from having this father who was rather laconic to your own experience of being a father. And it's something that doesn't feature very much in your book, but when it does so quite pungently. I think here we learn something about you. For the people who didn't know you before under that guise, we learned something. And I'd like you, Hitch, to read this little passage, if you don't mind. Do you need glasses?
Yes, I do, but I don't seem to have them. Hold on. Oh, yes, I do.
You do?
Those are dark.
I should have prepared you.
No, you should have done. It's all right, I found them.
Good.
Yes.
If you don't mind, you told me you wouldn't mind reading, and I think in your own words read by you might be better than by me. If you could read from there to there.
Good grief.
Do you want to read less?
Yes. Beginning with my deep.
I was going to begin right the last line
Yes.
there.
I should just prepare you for this by saying that I tell various anecdotes about my father, all of them very terse. One of them, which I forgot to put in, so I'll tell you now, is when he used to get up very early, which I've never been able to do, neither my mother, make himself breakfast down in the kitchen with the old coal range and baked eggs and strong tea and so forth. And I thought one morning it might be nice if I went down, I happened to be up early for God knows what reason, have breakfast with the old man. So I put on my corduroy shorts and so on and toddled down the stairs. Went in, morning, Daddy, and he looked up and said, Jesus Christ, it'll be family prayers next. From this you may get an impression. Also of his, it's also how I learned what his Baptist upbringing had probably been like. So, and I don't think I've ever had breakfast voluntarily ever since, actually. Okay, so these, you try to think, well, you won't be like that with your own kids. You'll be much more warm, supportive, might even have breakfast with them. So this is the bit you want me to read. My deep vice of lack of patience had its worst outcome, I feel sure, in the raising of my children. Many men feel somewhat useless during the early childhood of their offspring, as well as paralyzed with admiration for the way that women seem somehow to know what to do when the babies arrive. I don't think I can take refuge in the general weakness of my sex. Confronted with infancy, I was exceptionally no good. Anything I don't say here is only intended to spare others, not myself. Like not a few men, I set myself to overcompensate by working ever harder, which I think has its own justification in the biologically essential task of feeding and clothing and educating one's young, but I was really marking time till they were old enough to be able to hold a conversation. And I have to face the fact that the children of both my marriages learn much, much more about manhood and nurturing from their grandparents, my magnificent in-laws, than they did from me. That's one lapse, and not just a lapse in time, that I know I shall not make up for. One cannot invent memories for other people. And the father figure for my children must be indistinct at best until quite late in their lives. There are days when this gives me inexpressible pain, and I know that such days of remorse also lie in my future. I distinguish remorse from regret in that remorse is sorrow for what one did do, whereas regret is misery for what one did not do. Both seem to be involved in this case. My only recourse, my promise and vow, was and is to get a bit better as they get older. Hence this example, which I hope I'll be able to improve upon before they come and screw down the lid, or whatever it is. And that's where you want me to start, wisely. Yes.
That's an admission.
Yeah.
A very strong one.
Yes. And it was in case, I didn't live to see the publication of the book. I felt that I ought to leave a message in a bottle, that kind of thing. Something for them.
Have you become better?
You should ask them. But yes, I think so. Yeah. And with the young adult, I think I'm not bad. I mean, I know I'm not bad as a teacher. I get quite a lot of letters from students I've had telling me of their progress, of the age that at least my older children are now. People want to come and visit me. I always try and say yes. And I even wrote a book, which I know had some success. I don't quite know why it worked as well as it did. It's called Letters to a Young Contrarian, Fatuous Term. But it was
a word you've been associated with.
Advice to the young, anyway.
You don't like that word, contrarian?
No. I don't. In fact, I did